So I'm gonna make my first video where I'm going to work and try to talk. Um, it just feels a little awkward, but maybe I'll get over that. I really like drawing and painting, and when I'm doing it I think a lot and feel like I have something to say and share, and so I'm just gonna see if this works or not. I've been posting some videos online that are time-lapsed and people seem to like them, so we'll see how it goes if I do something more in real time. And just so you can see my process, because I love materials and discovering things through process, and I think by showing it in just regular video as opposed to fast time lapse, you might get a better sense of how it is I do what I do. So my name's Heather Bentz. I'm an artist and I'm based in Tucson, Arizona. And today I'm going to just show you how I work. I'm going to use this drawing that I did. Actually, I've got it upside down in my sketchbook. A drawing that I did while I was camping about a week or so ago. And I'm just going to use that as my beginning inspiration, and I just wanted to check it for just a little bit of recollection, and then I'm going to get started. I put my paper on a board so that I can move it around and work from any direction. Hopefully you can see what it is I'm doing. I first like to work just to get information down on the page, get my hand and mind engaged with not too much plan of how it's going to turn out and look at the end. I want the sense of discovery to happen, and even though I referred to that other drawing as just a starting point, I would expect this piece to sort of take on a life of its own and become whatever it's going to become. I like making repeated shapes. I like design and pattern. This is one of my favorite tools, is the Papermate Clear Point mechanical pencil. You can buy them in a grocery store, you can buy them at Target, anywhere, Walmart, office supply stores, any place. I'm trying not to think too much at this point about design or composition. Just getting information down, sort of seeing how it feels. Sometimes I like to just make marks like this. Just to sort of scratch around. It's almost like handwriting. Maybe a 2-year-old's handwriting. Or a 59-year-old's handwriting. But it starts to layer some information on the page. Another thing I like to use, which I don't really have that handy, but let's see if I can pull it out, are stencils, though maybe I'll just draw rather than using some cut stencils. But there's certain shapes that I use over and over again, and they come from found objects that I found at an old landfill years ago, and they were flat metal rusted pieces that were shaped like E's or M's or U's or C's, depending on which way they're oriented. and they really spoke to me. And they were just lying on the ground, sort of emerging out of the ground. And so I collected them, and I still have some of them, but I used just the memory of their shape, of the object. In my piece, they've sort of become what I consider my language. So there I've got, I don't know, can you see the pencil marks on there? Just some beginning things. It almost looks like some words forming and that kind of thing. So now I have the option of either working in, I've got colored pencils. These are mostly water-soluble pencils. I like their intense color, and I like that I can add water to them to make them appear more like paint if I want them to be, or just remain as pencil. The way I pick color, to work with color, is I either just think about it before I start and just say, okay, what am I feeling? What am I, what direction do I want maybe, the piece to, at least to begin with? Or sometimes my inspiration comes to me in a dream, or even when I'm just falling asleep, I will get just an image of artwork that's already done, that I haven't already made, but it's just there, and there's a color scheme that just is speaking to me. So recently I had, just as I was falling asleep, this vision, I guess, of pink and gray. So it was like these, and I thought, well, I'll just start with that. But who knows where it's going to go? Anything can happen. So I just start by just laying in some color. I don't really care if it's, real tight or exactly in the shapes that I've made. Just sort of approximate. And again, I'm trying not to make too many choices. I'm just trying to follow intuition of where I want to see some color. And it's not till I get towards the end of the piece that I start making more refined decisions of where I think elements need to be, or color needs to be, or valued shapes for overall composition and of the piece. So here I'm working on sort of this background space. I call that the negative space, whereas these shapes are the positive space. Here I was coloring in the positive space, and here I was going in around the positive space, really coloring in more the negative space. And I like to switch back and forth between that when I'm working, because I like that visual dance that happens. I'm a big fan of orange, so it's time to bring that in. Just adds some power and energy to the piece. Sometimes it can add too much energy, but that's okay, whatever. So I'm setting out here to make this video a 45-minute video. I've got a timer set. Hopefully I'll get some progress done here, and then we'll see where we are in 45 minutes. Yellow is often a, what's the word I'm looking for? An overall color that I like to bring in, unifying. It's a unifying color for me. If I feel like a piece feels disjointed, or it's just not really working, I'll bring in yellow, and that just seems to pull it together for me, and I can't really explain why. All right, some of these pencils are not water soluble, so when I'm using them, they will just, you know, if I put water on top of this, which I'm planning on doing, they will just not dissolve. They'll just stay as they are. It will stay as they are, as it is. There have been some pieces I've made where I've worked with all water-soluble pencils and materials, and then I add water to it and it pretty much just washes away everything, and it leaves a ghost image, which is fine, but sometimes it's like, oh, I would have liked a little more of that to have remained, but you only learn by doing. I tried to sharpen a lot of my pencils before I started this video just so that I'd be ready to go, but as you can see, putting in black, man, that takes it to a whole different place. Black, if you're thinking value-wise, like these other colors, the paper can be the lightest. The colors I've added are more of a medium tone, and then adding the black is like, ooh, that's the strongest. So just if you're making your own piece and you're trying to figure out if you're trying to say something or express a certain feeling or whatever, you just have to think about your color choices as to what it will end up feeling like or expressing. I like to often put in just a little bit of a dark, like the black, or sometimes I can even use well, even a darker blue that can help push it to start showing some depth, and then it allows me to start picking out the positive and negative shapes a little more. And even though I've like colored in, so to speak, in some areas, it doesn't mean that then that part's done. I like to layer. I like to work back in over and over on a piece. All right, so now I've taken a natural sponge, I've dipped it into some water I've got over here, and squeezed it out. So it's damp, it's not soaking wet. And I'm just gonna go over this, not wiping really hard, but just softening some of the color that's on here and moving it around a little bit. And you can see it just makes the colors a little brighter and richer. If I hit that black, which I'm gonna do, it's going to, it's just gonna make sort of more of a mess, but that's okay. What I try to think about as I'm working is that I expect the piece to go through various stages, and I don't always have to like what it looks like. All right, I'm gonna grab a Kleenex because I like to use that to sort of dab off some moisture if there's too much. And just because I'm making the video, I'm gonna try to get this to dry quickly so I can keep working into it. Another favorite material I like to use, or product, is Caran d'Ache water-soluble crayons. And those I can use even when the piece is damp. The paper is still wet. And so they go on, they're nice and creamy. And they're very forgiving, which is just so nice. I like when you, I like being able to trust my materials. I like to know what it is they're gonna do. So nice to have a nice variety of things to work with. But if you only have a pencil and a piece of paper, you still can make incredible work. By just working with simple and very few materials. And if I were just working in pencil, like that piece I had shown you in my sketchbook, I work the same way. It's still the layering of imagery and giving the piece enough time to develop. I used to teach elementary students with doing artwork, and I noticed that the older elementary students would get frustrated very early, whereas younger students, they're willing to just like stick with a piece and they just enjoy the process. Older students, they get more judgmental more quickly, and if you can work through some of the issues that your piece will give you, then it will work out in the long run, but just don't give up too soon. Okay, so now I think I'll flip it around, see what it looks like from different directions. And I think I'll work on it from this angle. One of the things I like to do is, like I said earlier is pull out some stencils, and so I use file folders that I draw shapes on, and then I can just start placing them. It allows me, before I even make the mark, to see where I might want to add some shapes. I didn't think about really pulling these things out before starting this video, so here's one of these. All right, I'll just lay this down. And if I repeat myself, sorry about that, but I do like repetition. I like to repeat shapes. So if one is good, maybe 3, 4, 5 is better. But then there is the old adage, less is more. So you just have to pick and choose what it is you want to say with your work. For me, it's an expression of energy. I have a lot of energy, and it's good for me to just direct it into making. So I'm liking how these circles then contain the information that was on that overall underneath. So sometimes I will try to really pick that out. So I start going into the negative space in here in the background to really make it pop out and differentiate. I like to draw freehand, and I like to use a ruler at times, or anything that can act as a ruler or a straight edge, whether it's the side of a piece of paper or an envelope or whatever is at hand. And here I can start making adjustments. I generally don't work with music on. I used to listen to jazz all the time. And then I did a residency at UCross, Wyoming, with an artist residency, and it was is when I just started working silently, and I found it to be really very nice. As you can see, things are starting to really emerge and become more defined. My work takes on an architectural aspect. People have told me for years, oh, it looks like buildings, windows, doors. So whatever it is you see is fine with me, whatever your frame of reference. it's just easier for me to turn this page around rather than trying to keep it oriented one way and trying to draw that way. So you might want to think about that when you're working at home, is to put your work onto a board of some sort. A piece of cardboard works. And I just use masking tape to put it down, to attach it. And I do it around all four edges because I use the water, and the water will make your paper buckle. So if it's taped around the whole edge of the paper, it helps hold it in place. And I'm working on very good paper. This is a 100% cotton rag paper made in Italy. It is a Fabriano paper, and I like a hot press paper. It's a flatter, smoother paper, very cottony feeling. Just feels really nice. I started using hot press paper when I was an undergrad at Penn State in printmaking. And so I never really enjoyed working on watercolor papers per se. They had too much texture and tooth, is what it's called. And I like a smoother paper. So here I could see I've got some curves that I could, so I've got choices to make at this point. You know, I can either do this rectangle or I could do these curves. At this point I'm just gonna leave this as a rectangle. One of the things I have to sort of be careful of when I'm working on a piece, because I do so many ovals and then like to create this, you know, outer rim, and then is that they look like eyes, you know, almost like cartoon eyes. And while I love my work to be light and happy, I try to avoid it taking on a face, because I want it just to be shapes, and if anything, I want it to maybe reference microscopic organisms or things moving around in the universe, or architectural shapes and forms that, you know, aren't supposed to be anything other than what you see. But I do get when it starts looking like, ooh, raised eyebrows and big eyeballs, and so I try not to do like just two. So I'll do 3 or 4 or 5, so that, okay, now it's taking on pattern. Hopefully you know what I'm talking about. I don't mind a little bit of goofy, because I'm pretty goofy. Here, oh yeah, here's the one already. I wanted to put one in If you have any questions about what it is I'm doing, and I realize you're not able to just say, hey, wait, why are you doing that? If you want to send me any questions, you are welcome to do so. You can find my website at heatherbentz.com. That's HEATHER, B as in boy, ENTZ.com. And I have a contact form there, so you can just send me a note and ask me a question. You could join my mailing list if you want, or not that I communicate through a newsletter or anything. very often, but maybe I will in the future. Who knows? So if you have a question, just send it to me. I'd love to answer it. All right, let's try something else. I am going to add some watercolor just for fun. I'm using like a 1-inch flat brush. Got my water, I've got my palette here. I use watercolor and or gouache, and because they both can be transparent, and I just pick the color I want when I'm at the store, art store, and I'm looking at what kind of color I want to buy. Whichever is cheapest is what I'll get. I mean, between gouache and watercolor. If I'm looking for like a magenta like that, and there's a Winsor Newton magenta watercolor and a Winsor Newton magenta gouache, and one is less expensive than the other, I'll get the lesser of the two. Least expensive of the two. You know what I mean, I hope. Okay, so I'm loving how that pink is interacting with the yellow underneath. It just starts getting sort of exciting. And here I can just use the edge of my brush to try to go around the edges of these shapes. I really try to use the brush to do the work. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on because I don't want too much to move around. It's funny, I feel my hand shaking a little bit. I think I'm a little nervous doing this video, because I don't want to disappoint you. Hopefully you can see my palette. Maybe I'll move it in a little closer here. So I've got all my various colors. I buy them in a tube. I squeeze them out into their little spaces, and then I use these areas for mixing. And I rarely ever clean off this area, because these colors, even though they're dry, like that's the only one that's wet right now. Sorry, I see that I'm not in the camera's view. This one's the only one that's wet at the moment, the pink. All these are dry, but I leave them there because if I add water to them, that's still good pigment. That's still good paint to use. So I don't want to start with a clean mixing surface per se. I'll use what's there. I can layer color. So I'm working on I'm working very small for me. This is a, I don't know, let's see how big this is. About 7 by 10 1/4. I wanted to work small so that you could get a better sense of how I start from nothing and end up with something. I like to generally work a little larger, I guess. But there was something I was going to say about that, and now I forget. Anyway, maybe it'll come to me. So now I'm starting to make some conscious decisions as opposed to just working intuitively like I was when I was first making my marks, and that I'm starting to look at the composition that has emerged and where I want to start trying to balance some color. So here I've got an area of yellow, here I've got an area of yellow, and then down here I want to pump this area up a little bit. It's a little too bland. I might have to go back in with colored pencil, or like the water-soluble pencils, to boost it a little bit more once this is dry. But overall, I'm sort of liking the light airy areas down here and balanced with these white, lighter areas up here. I use my hand a lot to block out, okay, if that were, this white area, if that weren't there, how would it read? Would it make it better? Or is it better with it there? I can't really tell yet. I've got a fan going on overhead because it's pretty hot here today. So that'll help dry this, but I want to try to get it to dry a little faster. So I'm going to grab a piece of cardboard. Hopefully you can hear me when I sort of walk away from this. So I'll just fan this, get it to dry a little more so that I can go back in and draw on it. If when the paper is sort of damp and I draw with my pencil, because the pencil is so sharp, it scratches the paper, which might be an effect you want, but it's not what I want right now. Because I want to go in and start doing a little more defining and refining. And I know that if the paper's too wet, it won't work the way I want it to. Okay, I do this. The reason I didn't want to do the dabbing with the Kleenex at first is that it will lift away the color, and I wanted the color there. But I think just for sake of trying to speed this along, I'm gonna do this. I can always add it in later. All right, I want to take a look at that. Is how I'm seeing it. This way. I am going to turn it around just to get a different look. I don't really like it that way. That's not bad. What do you think? That orientation? Yeah, I don't think the horizontal orientation is really working very well. I think a vertical is working better. And I have had it this way for a while, so maybe now I'll work on it this way just to see where it goes. And I'm gonna stand now. I've been sitting. I'm gonna stand to be able to get a little more perspective, a little more distance from it. I'll use a brown. And this is a water soluble. Brown has a bit of red to it. That's one of the things I like about the pencil is that it's gray. I'm a big fan of gray. My nose is running. Sorry, I had to take a little break there. Okay, I see on my timer I've got 5 minutes left. There's any number of directions where this piece could go. And you know, I'm still sort of liking where it's headed at the moment. But one of the things, another technique I like to use, which maybe I'll just show you here, is like I could spend hours on a piece, And it could either be a drawing, painting in water-soluble mediums, or it could even be a painting on canvas with acrylics. And doesn't matter how long I've spent on a piece, there are times that I think, oh, if I go in with a sander or sandpaper and sand down what I've got on the page, it changes things. So I've got some sandpaper here, and I'm just going to show you what happens, because I can always go back into this and build up the colors and the refinement that I have going on here. But I just want to show you what will happen if I sand it. You have to make sure that your page is pretty dry before sanding, or else it just sort of gets gunked up. So now you see it the way it is, and now we'll sand it. Now this is pretty fine sandpaper. I've got something that's a little more rough. I think I'll try that because it'll work faster. It's going to sort of blur everything. And it takes the painting back to a not so finished state. It adds some scratch marks. And it makes the paper sort of fuzzy. So now what I'll do is go back in and say, okay, now I need to build it up again. So it's a good tool to have, I guess, if you feel like your piece has gotten away from you. I can't say that I necessarily felt like that, this piece had gotten away from me, but I wanted to show you just how you say, okay, this one's gotten away from me. I can sand it down. I can work back into it. Not all is lost. And like I was saying, I never really care how long I spend on a piece. Some pieces I work on for months or even over years, not constantly, but some pieces I just can't resolve quickly. Okay, I can see a little hint of the orange I'd like to bring back. Let's see which orange. This or yellow. Yellow would be good. For me, doing the sanding, it adds history to the surface. It makes things feel a little not so precious, which I like. So I think you've had a chance to see how the piece has gone through some different iterations, different, just different directions in 45 minutes. So I'll probably keep working on this, and I'll post the final picture of where it ends up. And there's my timer. Let's see if I can figure out how to turn it off. There we go. Oh, I am changed. Here we go. Okay, see, I'm trying to turn this off. Oh, there we go. That worked. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I will work on this some more, and then I will post how it finally ends up. Okay, see you next time.